Welcome back. Now, the legacy of apartheid is the focus of the bookshelf today. I've invited author Thamsanqa Malinga to discuss his book, Blame Me on Apartheid. It looks at the creation of townships and how their very structure and continued existence entrench the principles of apartheid. Thamsanqa, welcome to the bookshelf and thank you for your time. Now, first of all, the book, I noticed, was written in thesis form.
Good morning, Masego, and good morning to the viewers. Yeah, I actually did not want to, thumbsuck stuff so that people will say, but it's just nothing. You're telling us nothing. So I had to go into do a whole lot of research to substantiate what are the points that I'm raising in the book. So I did not want it to just be Thamsanqa telling a story, but I wanted it to show that there is evidence that supports what I'm saying in the book through a lot of studies that have been conducted, through a lot of other content that is available out there.
Mm. Now, you also make a lot of reference to Mpomoloto. Tell us why specifically Mpomoloto.
Mpomoloto is actually my nephew. I was so fortunate to have been raised by his grandfather in Newcastle, Matadeni, a township that's outside Newcastle. And Mpo wrote a book called From the Townships. This is the book. So when he wrote the book, he was actually putting across the conditions that he's observing. Now, I looked at it and I said, Mpo was born just a year before, we went into the democratic polls. So I then said, I need to further articulate what he's raising. He was raising issues that he's seeing at face value. Now, when I read his book, and then I felt I need to put more context into that. I need to actually just teach him and his generation that what he's observing in the township has actually got a legacy that stems back from colonialism and apartheid. So every issue that Mpo discusses, I dig deep into that, and I talk whether it's economy in the township, whether it's self-hate, whether it's the issue of religion, whether it's how the township itself has been, the structural creation of the township itself. So I dig deep into that to actually show that there's a systematic and structural creation that predates everything. It starts with colonialism. It was maintained by apartheid. And what he's seeing now, it's not something that just happened overnight. The issues that he's seeing are not issues that crept up overnight. So I reference a lot back into that. So if you want to get the context of where Blame Me on Apartheid is coming from, you've actually also got to engage with Mpomoloto's book, From the Township.
So tell me a little bit about this construction. I grew up in the township of Soweto, and I obviously knew some of the things that you were talking about in the book, but I really didn't realize, of course, maybe it has to do with when I was born or when I started to realize some things. But the construction of the township, you mentioned, for instance, that there was only Elias Motswaledi Road, which back then was called Rhodiport Road, I believe, and the N12, which basically were just two roads that led to one point, and that was cheap employment. Talk to us a little bit further about that.
Now, if I start by saying, when I grew up, I used to go to work with my dad, who was a delivery salesman for a soft drinks company. Now, he would go to do deliveries in mining compounds. Now, if you look at the structure of a mining compound, you drive into a gate. There is a compound where all the laborers stay. It's got one beer hall which serves as an entertainment venue. If you are not sitting at the beer hall, you are either at the soccer field playing there, or you are either at the community hall, which is within the mining compound. So I then go back and say that is how townships are created. they actually came from that structural background when when Johannesburg, when the cities were being industrialized and cheap labor was needed. So the compounds, the men's compounds were created. Now those men's compounds then were further, went in some form of a metamorphosis into being townships. Now if you look at most townships, there is one entry point and one exit point. I make the case of Soweto example where I grew up, that in Soweto there was the Soweto Highway, which led to the Joburg CDD, which led to Boyson's, Offerton, which were industrial areas. So it was meant for labor to come out of the township and go serve at the industrial areas and come back as well. Then there was Elias Motsoaledi. Then there's Elias Motsoaledi, which was back then used to be called Roodepoort Road, because it led to the mining town of Roodepoort when there was Roodepoort Durban Deep Mine. So that road, it was just for labor to come out of the township into Roodepoort, the mining town. And further down you had Old Potchefstroom, which now is called Chris Hani. That also was used for labor to move out of Soweto into the western area, into the mining industries that were there. So townships are created like that. They sit out of nowhere. That is why I call them peripheral spaces. They sit outside of the main economy in the periphery, and the only thing that they are there for is for labor to come out in the morning, go into the industrial areas and come back. So if it's not only the issue with Soweto, I've stayed in Thandubukanya in Piet Retief. The same with Thandubukanya. There's only one street that comes in and out of Thandubukanya. So it means Thandubukanya, being on the outskirts, being on the periphery, has one street that comes in and out just for labor to come out and go and ply their labor in the CBD of Piet Retief. The same with Standerton as well. You go to Standerton, besides the new developments that are along the N4, you would see that there was one street that led in and out of Sakile in Standerton. The same with Madadeni, the places that I've lived in. So those are the stories that I bring in to say, I am not just writing because I'm Thamsanqing this. I've lived the experience. Townships have been put outside with one entry and one exit points, and that is taken from the system of mining compounds. So the townships have been created like old school mining compounds. Labor needs to stay there at the periphery, only to come out when they go into the CBDs to ply their trade.
Now, Thamsanqa, I want to bring you to the education part of it, and this one is very sad. You know, you look at the fact that it's a vicious cycle. It's something that, you know, as black people we have inherited, where our parents are undereducated, their parents were left off probably even worse, and it goes down to us. And that's where I think a lot of people would say black tax comes from, because you have to plow back so that you can assist the others to be able to assist each other, right? But you also quoted, for instance, in this chapter where you spoke about the education system. You said in the same, the Bantu must be taught nothing more than to be a hewer of wood and drawer of water. And this was a Hendrik Verwoerd quote. And I found it interesting that you would start with that, because a lot of people would argue that till this day, we're still stuck there in some of our schools.
Very much. In fact, I conclude by saying that, to say, if we still continue the system in which Hendrik Verwoerd had designed Bantu education, we haven't changed anything. We design schools to be, you know, what Paulo Freire calls in the pedagogy of the oppressed, a system that it's called a banking system. You know, we send young people to schools to just put information in them, and then at the end of the year we withdraw. So we deposit information, we withdraw. We do not, our education right now as it is does not teach our young people from an early age to be entrepreneurs, you know, You go to social media, everyone is talking about entrepreneurship, you need to start businesses, but has the education been designed in that format? No, we forever now keep on dropping the pass rate. We forever, keep on churning graduates that are not even finding employment. They have been now reduced to the shame of their forefathers, where they've got to go and stand at the traffic lights with billboards, placards to say, I have got a BSc in this and that, and yet they are not given employment. So we're maintaining a system with our education as it is currently, a system that has been designed by apartheid. And if you recall, a couple of years back, I mentioned that in the book, there was a campaign where it was called Wipe the Smile Off His Face.
Yeah, from international relations.
Let's wipe the smile off Hendrik Verwoerd's face, in the sense that we've got to transform our education because it is still what he designed it to be. We are forever saying, we need young people we're pushing graduates, we're pushing get a degree this, get a degree this to get a job. So we are still saying young black people must be hewers of wood and drawers of water. We're not teaching them skills. We're not giving them skills.
Yeah.
We're giving them just theory to say, go get a job. That happened when we were still at school. You would be in high school and your teacher would say, yeah, don't worry, my boy, when you finish school, you'll get a job.
You'll be a banker.
Right now.
Thamsanqa, I have to come to a conclusion, but I just wanted to talk to you about, after reading your book and seeing all the evidence that you quoted in this book to make your point come across as eloquently as you could. We speak about how the townships were constructed, these roads that led only to the cheap employment or the cheap labor, the education crisis or that vicious cycle between parents and generations going down, finances you obviously cannot leave out when you talk about the legacy of apartheid coming to black people, the fact that the entrepreneurship, you find Abo Mama selling oranges, etc. on the side of the road, and that's the best that they can do in most cases. The unemployment, you cannot leave that out. The youth is even more affected right now. The self-hate that we have with xenophobic attacks and Afrophobia, as it's called in the media now. I want to ask you a question as the author of this book. More than 25 years into democracy, we're seeing the flare-up of other new townships. For instance, your Ramaphosa township, I think, is on the East Rand, for instance. Many others that are coming up, and the situation is still the same. So it looks like that legacy of apartheid has basically just been put on the government's shoulder, the current government's shoulder, and they are carrying it on.
I'm glad you raised that. That is why I've always said this is a government that is managing an apartheid system. No one overthrew. We didn't overthrow apartheid. We didn't overthrow it. The current government inherited apartheid. In fact, not inherited. They were bequeathed apartheid at the CODESA negotiations. So it's now like you get a shop that's got a sign outside that says under new management. So South Africa, as it is now, it is South Africa that is still an apartheid system that is just under new management. The current government is managing that. That is why there is just flourishing of new townships under new names. Your Cosmo cities, your Savannah cities, your Sky cities. There are still townships that are very outside of the main economy. People who live there, they've got to travel. I normally make an example that where I stay, in Naturena, which is still about, 15 km from Joburg CBD. If you drive further, it's about, there's Savannah City, 35 kilometers from where I am right now. So for someone who stays there, the nearest mall, which is Southgate Mall, is 35 kilometers away. Now, if that person works in Midrand, now add another 45 kilometers. So that person will be traveling about 80 kilometers a day to and from to work. So it's a township. It's in the periphery. It's just in a farm somewhere. So the government inherited an apartheid system. Now they're further coming up with allowing these companies to build more townships under fancy names, but now it's just that it's townships that are bonded. You know, people are now have got to go to the bank in order to get a house loan. So it's even, it makes it much more worse than what it was under apartheid. Now you've got to actually pay 400,000 rand to live in a township that's very far from where you work. So it's still in apartheid.
All right, Thamsanqa Malinga, thank you very much for your time. We have to leave it there, unfortunately. He is the author of Blame Me on Apartheid, which we were reviewing on the bookshelf here on eNCA today.